Okay, so we're going to take a look at how to create a custom exception. So up until now, all we know how to do is to use the exceptions that are already built in to Java. But creating our own custom ones is pretty easy. The ones that are built in deal with like really critical problems like file input and output errors, out of bounds errors, and stuff like that. Stuff that'll completely break the code. So, but there may be some errors that we want to catch that are a little bit smaller. So the example we're going to look at has to deal with the bank account class. We've seen this class several times. It's pretty simple. It just has a balance. It'll have some getters and setters in here for increasing and decreasing, like withdrawals and deposits, stuff like that. So what we want to do is handle what if the user gives us a negative balance. That's not correct. They shouldn't be able to do that. So we're going to make a custom exception to handle it. So looking at this, all we have to do is create a class, give it a name. I might have come up with an easier name or a smaller name, but we called it negative starting balance. The first rule that you need to follow is that it extends the exception class. So if you recall, I showed you guys the hierarchy of where all these exception classes, they inherit from the exception class, which then it inherits from the throwables class, which inherits from the objects class, right? They all kind of connect. So any kind of custom exception I make should extend the exception class because they are exceptions, right? Okay, the only other thing that you really need in an exception class is a constructor. That's literally it. That's all. Easy peasy. So in here, I've got a single constructor here that we're looking at that has a custom message that says error, you can't have a negative starting balance. One thing to take note of is that it's calling the super constructor. I myself was like, well, why is it doing that? Why can't we just make a toString in here and have it print out this message, right? Why are we making it complicated? So I got to do some digging, and I went and I pulled up the exceptions classes Java doc online. This is the only things that are in it, which is kind of interesting. I need all heads up, please. These are the only things that are in it. I've got 5 constructors. That's it. So if you look at the constructor here, takes in a string, a message, right? That's the super constructor I'm calling. I'm sending it the message. But I was like, wait, there's no toString. It's not printing from here, right? So then I got to look in and remembered that the exception class extends throwable. So it has a superclass. So I pulled up the throwables Java doc. The throwables Java doc denotes that it has a toString in it. So I made that connection that here's what's really happening. When I create this message here and I send it to the superclass, it's sending it to the exception class. Where do you think the exception class is sending it? To the throwable class, which is then in turn printing it, right? Okay, I won't go into depth into like how all this really kind of works, why that does that, because I don't know, but I know that that's what happens. So I'm kind of sending it up through the super classes until it prints it from the throwable. And you'll see where we use the throwable class here in a second. There is a second constructor actually in here that takes in an amount. So if I know the amount, I can print a more customized message out, including the amount. So that's the only thing that's here. All you got to do is extend exception and create a custom message and send it to the superclass, exception class. Questions? Pretty easy. Now let's see how we would implement it. Here's where it gets a little confusing. So we go to the bank account class. We got a default constructor here. Yay. Okay, here's where the issue is going to come up. So we have a constructor that takes in the balance. This is the one that actually can check to see if it's negative, right? We're going to add what's called a throws clause to it. So if the starting balance is less than 0, we're going to have a throws clause that creates that negative starting balance object, the exception object. I can either send it the starting balance or not. If I don't send it, it'll print a generic message. If I do send it, it'll use the other constructor and it'll include the balance in the message. So either one's fine. One thing you got to know, you'll notice it's broken. If you're going to add a throws clause to anything, you have to add a throws declaration to the method header. We've seen this before when we do file input and output. We got to add a throws clause to our main method header for the throws and input output. So we've seen this before, right? We always click the little error and it adds it up there for us. So yeah, so we've got to add that up there. That just tells it that it can throw that exception. All right, and Eclipse is going to yell at you and say to add that anyway. Questions on this? That's it. That's it for this class. Okay, so we can throw our custom exception anywhere we want to. All right. Now in the demo class, here's what this one looks like. So if I add a throws declaration to this constructor here, and I use that constructor, which I am because I'm giving it a balance, I have to add the throws declaration as well to the main method header. And again, Eclipse is going to remind you to do that. So that's what's going to fix that. If I don't have this throws, I don't have to add the throws here, but it has to match if I use it, right? If I'm pretty sure if I use the default constructor, it goes away. The error goes away. But if I use the one that has the throws declaration, I have to add the same throws here as well. If I hit play, there's my exception. It says error, negative starting balance, negative 100. Pretty cool, huh? I just made my own custom one. The only thing that's not good with this is it's in the red letters, right? So the user is not going to see this error pop up. So what do I need to do to make sure the user can see this error? We're going to do a try catch. So let's add that in. We already know how to do a try catch, so nothing new about this. There's my custom exception, right? I could make that just exception and do the catch-all, right? But this is going to be better because I know the actual exception. There's my e.get message. So if I run it here, it prints the actual error message that I had put in myself back here in the negative starting balance class. Last thing to take note of, you only need one or the other. So because I put in a try catch, I don't have to have the throws. The Java likes one or the other. It needs something to handle the exception, either a throws clause or a try catch. Either one will satisfy it. Okay. So on the notes, if you're looking at the notes, let me bring them up. It's a lot to take in, but I want to show you what the most important things are, right? So underneath all of these, I have these little captions. Those are the most important things you need to know. So for the exception class you make sure it extends exception, and then send a custom message to the super constructor. In the actual class where you use it, you're going to add a throws clause to create the new create the object right here, and add a declaration in the header. So right there. One thing I did miss talking about was the @exception Java doc. So here in bank account, there's an @exception that you can add to the Java doc, and all it does is say, hey, this can throw an exception. This is not required, by the way, but it's good to have. It says, hey, it can throw an exception for having a negative starting balance. Okay. Any questions? It's a lot of little moving pieces, which is why I wanted to give you a really good example. Okay. Good?